The city was already awake when Clara reached the tall glass building. She stood on the wide stone steps, clutching the strap of her mother's bag that nearly brushed the ground. Her shoes clicked softly against the pavement, polished but old, the kind that showed care rather than wealth. Clara was only 8 years old, but her eyes held a seriousness most children did not carry. Her braids swung lightly as she looked up at the towering structure. The letters above the door gleamed in silver, spelling out the name of a company she had only heard in her mother's late-night whispers. Her mother was supposed to be here today, but her mother was sick. Too sick to rise from bed, too weak to make the trip she had been preparing for over weeks. So Clara had dressed herself in the morning light, buttoned her dress with steady hands, and decided to come instead. She knew this was not what children did. Children went to school, children played, but she also knew her mother had pinned her hopes on this interview, that it meant something larger than the four walls of their apartment. So she walked forward, step by step, her heart beating hard but steady. She would go inside. She would say the words her mother could not. Clara's footsteps echoed as she entered the lobby. The glass doors closed behind her with a soft hiss, and suddenly the noise of the city was gone. The space was open and quiet, with marble floors that seemed to stretch endlessly. Tall windows let the morning light spill in, glowing against polished surfaces. A woman at the front desk lifted her eyes from her computer screen. Her smile, meant for adults rushing in with papers and briefcases, faltered when she saw Clara. The little girl walked closer, the handbag heavy in her small hands. "Good morning," Clara said softly, her voice steady though her chest felt tight. The receptionist leaned forward, confusion and curiosity mixing in her face. "Sweetheart, are you lost? Are you waiting for someone?" Clara shook her head. "No, ma'am. My mom was supposed to come, but she's sick, so I came instead." The words hung in the air. The woman blinked, her hand resting on the desk, as though she was unsure whether to call security or kneel down to Clara's level. Clara straightened her shoulders, repeating the phrase her mother had whispered to her many times. She had an interview today. "Please, I'm here for her." The receptionist hesitated but then stood, smoothing her jacket. She bent slightly toward Clara. "Your mother had an interview with Mr. Grant." Clara nodded firmly. "Yes." The woman studied her for a moment, then sighed. She picked up her phone, spoke quietly to someone, and finally gestured for Clara to follow. "Come with me. We'll see what can be done." Clara walked behind her, the sound of her shoes tapping against the polished floor louder than she wished. The hallway stretched on, lined with wooden doors, each marked with silver plaques. People in suits passed by, their eyes flicking curiously at the sight of a child moving through the company's heart. Clara kept her chin high, though her palms were damp against the handbag strap. Every step reminded her of her mother's weak voice that morning. "If only I could go, Clara. If only I could." Now she was here. She was carrying that hope. The receptionist stopped before a tall door, darker wood than the others, with a brass plate engraved, "Alexander Grant, CEO." She looked down at Clara again, still unsure, but the little girl gave a small nod. She was ready, or at least, she wanted to be. The woman knocked. Alexander Grant was not a man easily surprised. His days were filled with numbers, contracts, and decisions that shifted entire markets. Yet, when the door opened and a small girl stood framed by the light, his pen paused mid-sentence. The receptionist cleared her throat nervously. "Mr. Grant, this is Clara. She has come in place of her mother, who was scheduled for the interview." Alexander leaned back in his chair. His gaze moved from the child's neat braids to the handbag too large for her shoulder. His brow lifted slightly, but his voice remained even. "Is that so?" Clara stepped forward, her heart hammered, but she remembered her mother's advice. "Speak clearly, don't fidget." "Yes, sir. My mom is sick. She wanted very much to come, but she couldn't, so I came instead." The silence stretched. The city hummed faintly beyond the glass windows, but inside, only the tick of the clock filled the space. Finally, Alexander gestured to the chair across from him. "Then sit. Clara, tell me, why do you believe your mother wanted this job?" Clara climbed onto the seat, her feet not touching the ground, but her back straight. She opened the handbag carefully. Inside were papers her mother had prepared, creased but neatly arranged. Clara placed the papers on the desk with care. Her hands trembled, but her voice stayed steady. "These are my mom's things. She wrote about her work, and the people she helped before she got sick. Alexander leaned forward, scanning the pages without touching them. He studied the neat but worn writing, the notes in the margins. His sharp eyes flicked back to Clara, watching the way she pressed her hands together, holding herself calm. My mum is kind, Clara continued. She works hard. Even when she didn't feel well, she tried. She wanted this job so she could take care of me better. Her words slowed, her chest rising with the effort to be brave. She told me it was important, that Mr. Grant would listen. Alexander's expression shifted, though his voice remained measured. And what about you, Clara? Why did you think you should come? Clara's gaze lifted to meet his. Because she couldn't, and I didn't want her to lose the chance. She's my mum. She deserves someone to speak for her. For a long moment, Alexander said nothing. He studied the child across from him, small yet unflinching. The room felt different now, less like an office and more like a quiet place where something important was about to be decided. Alexander folded his hands, his eyes steady on the little girl. Years of negotiations had taught him to read people, yet here was a child speaking with more sincerity than most adults who crossed his desk. Clara, he said slowly, this company is not a place for children. These interviews are for those who have trained, worked, and studied. Why should I even listen to you? Clara blinked but did not look away. Because my mum believed you would. She said people like you can see when someone is telling the truth. The words struck deeper than he expected. Alexander leaned back, silent, stretching again. Clara's braids brushed her shoulders as she lowered her gaze, pressing her hands together tighter. He thought of his own childhood, long hidden behind years of success, of a boy who had once sat quietly while adults made decisions over his head. Something about Clara's calmness, her unshaken courage, reminded him of that boy. Finally, he said, tell me about your mother, not her work, not her papers. Tell me about her as you see her. Clara's lips curved in a faint smile, fragile but real. She sings when she cooks, even when she's tired. She gives me the bigger piece of bread when there isn't enough. She says sorry to the plants when she forgets to water them. She's good. The girl's words landed gently, but they carried weight. Alexander looked down at the papers again, then back to Clara. Her hands had unclenched now, resting on her lap. She had spoken from a place that needed no proof. You love her very much, Alexander said quietly. Clara nodded. She's everything I have. The honesty in her tone stirred something in him, something he rarely let surface. Most who sat across his desk wanted only salary, titles, or influence. Yet here was a child, speaking not for herself but for someone else entirely. What do you hope I'll do, Clara? He asked. Her small shoulders lifted as she breathed in. Give her a chance. She doesn't want charity. She wants to work. If she works here, she'll get better. We'll be okay. Alexander tapped a finger against the desk, studying the child's steady face. Few people dared to look him in the eye. Clara did. He had a dozen meetings waiting, a dozen files stacked neatly on his schedule, but somehow they all seemed distant. At last, he stood. Come, he said, his voice firm but gentler than before. Let's take a walk. Clara blinked, uncertain, then slid down from the chair, clutching the handbag once more. The hallway felt different with Alexander beside her. His long strides slowed to match Clara's smaller steps. Employees lifted their heads, surprised to see the stern CEO walking with a child at his side. Whispers rose, but quickly faded when his gaze swept over them. Clara hugged the handbag to her chest. Trying to look brave though, the eyes following her made her cheeks warm. She kept pace, careful not to stumble. Alexander glanced down at her. Do you know what your mother would be doing here, Clara? She nodded quickly. Helping. She always says she wants to make things better wherever she is. She would listen, even if people didn't talk loud. She would notice when someone needed help. His jaw tightened slightly. Those words did not sound like lines prepared for a job interview. They sounded like truth carried from a child's heart. They stopped at a wide window that overlooked the city. The glass stretched floor to ceiling. The streets below, moving like veins of light. This company is large, Alexander said. Thousands of people depend on what we decide here. Mistakes are not small. Clara looked up at him, her voice clear. That's why you need someone like my mum. Her answer made him pause. Few adults ever answered him so directly. The cafeteria buzzed with quiet conversation and the clatter of dishes. Yet at the corner table where Alexander and Clara sat, there was calm. He had brought her here, away from the heavy silence of his office. A glass of milk sat before her, nearly full. She cupped it with both hands, taking small sips, her braids falling forward as she bent. Alexander watched, his mind turning. "Clara," he said after a moment, "do you know what people say about me?" She looked up, milk on her lip. "No, they say I am strict, that I don't bend rules, that I do not waste time on things that do not matter." Clara tilted her head. "Am I wasting your time?" His throat tightened slightly at the question. "No," he said at last, "you are not." Clara's shoulders eased. She smiled a little, the first true smile since she had entered the building. "Then maybe it means my mom wasn't wrong," she said. "Sometimes people hide their kind side behind serious faces." Alexander almost smiled but didn't. Instead, he leaned back, his gaze sharp again, though softened at the edges. The child's words slipped past his defenses in ways few things could. He set his hands on the table. "I want to meet your mother, Clara. Will you bring me to her?" The city felt different once they left the building. Clara walked a few steps ahead, her braids swaying, the handbag still heavy at her side. Alexander followed, his polished shoes clicking against the uneven pavement. This was not the path he usually walked. His world was filled with black cars, tall towers, and boardrooms lined with glass. Yet here he was, letting a child guide him down quieter streets where laundry hung from windows and children played with old balls in narrow alleys. Clara glanced back now and then, checking if he was still there. "It's not far," she said softly. Alexander nodded. "Good." They turned a corner, and the apartment building came into view. It was plain, the paint faded, the stair rails rusting in spots, yet there was a sense of life in its windows, voices drifting faintly from open rooms. Clara slowed at the entrance, her hand brushing the worn door. She looked up at him, her eyes steady despite her nerves. "She might be sleeping, but she wants to see you." For the first time in years, Alexander felt his chest tighten, not from stress or decisions, but from something quieter, something human. "Then let's go," he said. Together, they stepped inside. The apartment smelled faintly of soup and laundry soap. The curtains let in muted light, soft against the faded wallpaper. Clara pushed open the door carefully, her steps light as though she feared waking her mother. On the sofa, a thin figure stirred. Her mother lifted her head, her face pale but her eyes alive with surprise. "Clara, you're back so soon." Clara hurried forward, setting the handbag down. "Mama, I brought someone." Alexander stepped into the room, his tall frame almost too large for the narrow space. He stood quietly, letting the mother take in the sight of him. Confusion flickered across her face, then understanding. "You are Mr. Grant," she whispered, her voice unsteady. Alexander inclined his head. "I am. Your daughter insisted I meet you." Clara's mother tried to sit straighter, though the effort cost her. She pulled the blanket closer, her hands trembling. I'm so sorry I couldn't come. I wanted this chance." But Alexander lifted a hand gently. "There is nothing to apologize for. Clara spoke well for you, better than most." The woman's eyes welled with tears, not from weakness, but from the sight of her child standing so bravely beside her. Clara moved to her mother's side, slipping her small hand into the larger, thinner one. She looked up, her face bright with relief. "I told him about you, Mama. I told him how good you are." Her mother brushed a braid from Clara's cheek, her eyes soft but wet. "You shouldn't have carried this burden, Clara. It was mine, not yours." Clara shook her head quickly. "I wanted to. I didn't want you to lose your chance." Alexander sat quietly, watching the exchange. Something stirred inside him, a reminder of what it meant to fight for someone else. The girl's devotion, the mother's quiet strength despite her illness, it was unlike the sharp negotiations of his usual days. He leaned forward. "Your daughter convinced me to listen. She showed me courage few adults possess. If that reflects who you are, then I believe this company could use someone like you." The mother blinked, stunned. "You mean it?" "Yes," he said firmly, "but it is not only about work. It is about dignity, and your daughter has shown me more of that today than many who walk my halls." Clara squeezed her mother's hand tighter, her smile widening. For the first time in days, her mother's shoulders eased, hope flickering across her tired face. From inside his briefcase, Alexander pulled a folder, its corners sharp and papers neatly stacked within. He set it gently on the worn coffee table, the contrast striking against the scratched wood. This, he said, is an offer, a role suited to your skills, one that allows you to work while caring for your health. It is not charity, it is recognition. Clara's mother reached out slowly, her fingers brushing the cover as though afraid it might vanish. I don't know what to say, she whispered. Clara leaned forward, her eyes shining. Say yes, Mama. A laugh escaped the woman's lips, weak but filled with emotion. Yes, she breathed. Yes, I accept. Alexander nodded once, his expression calm but his eyes softer than before. He rarely allowed himself moments like this, yet here, in a small apartment, he felt he had made a decision that mattered far more than profit margins. Clara bounced slightly in her seat, unable to contain her joy. See, Mama, I told you he would listen. Her mother pulled her close, pressing her cheek against Clara's hair. Yes, Clara, you were right, and for a moment, the room felt warmer, as if light itself had decided to stay. The day stretched into evening, shadows gathering outside the small windows. Alexander rose at last, his presence filling the doorway. Clara walked with him, her small hand gripping the handbag once more, though now it seemed lighter. At the door, she stopped and looked up at him. Her eyes were steady, though softer than before. Thank you, Mr. Grant, she said, for believing me, for believing her. Alexander studied her for a long moment. You did something few people dare. You spoke for someone else with honesty. That is rare. Clara tilted her head. Will my mum be okay now? He placed a hand lightly on the frame of the door. With work, support, and with you beside her. Yes, I believe she will. Clara's smile was small but certain. She nodded, her braids swaying. For Alexander, walking out into the evening air, there was a shift he could not deny. The city still roared with its endless demands, but tonight, he carried something different. Not just another task completed, but a reminder of what truly mattered. Behind him, the door closed softly, leaving the warmth of that home tucked away in the heart of the city. The city glowed with 1,000 lights, each window a small story. In their modest apartment, Clara sat pressed against her mother, the blanket wrapped around them both. Her mother's arms circled her shoulders, gentle but firm. You were brave today, Clara, she whispered. Braver than I ever imagined. Clara leaned into her. I was just doing what you would have done for me. Outside, cars hummed along distant streets. Inside, the world felt still. The weight of worry that had pressed on them for weeks eased at last, replaced by something lighter. Her mother kissed the top of her head. You gave me more than a job today. You gave me hope. Clara closed her eyes, the city's glow washing softly through the window. For the first time in a long while, she felt safe. The future was not certain, but it was brighter now, and it was theirs to walk together. Far away. In his tall glass office, Alexander Grant looked out at the same city, remembering the little girl who had dared to walk into his world and remind him what strength truly meant. And so, in two very different places, 3 lives shifted quietly toward something new.